A single act of malice can echo across the globe in an instant. For Meridian Airways gate, Agent Brenda Gallagher, a condescending smirk and a few cruel words were just another power trip on a tedious Tuesday morning. For Desmond Rowe, a brilliant creative director on his way to the biggest presentation of his life, it was a public humiliation that threatened to derail his entire career. He was targeted for the color of his skin and the confidence with which he wore his success. But neither of them could have predicted how a quiet moment of prejudice at Gate K-12 would ignite a digital firestorm, exposing a corporate rot and delivering a brutal, life-altering lesson in consequence. This isn't just a story about an apology. It's about what happens when the world is watching and karma comes to collect with receipts. The air in Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 hummed with the organized chaos of travel. It was a symphony of rolling luggage-clipped PA announcements and the low murmur of 1,000 intersecting journeys. Amidst it all, Desmond Rowe stood as an island of composed elegance. He was a man who understood the power of presentation, not just in his work as a creative director for a top-tier design firm, but in his life. Today, he was wearing what he called his closing suit. It was a bespoke creation of deep plum wool, tailored to perfection. It was bold, unconventional, and exuded the same quiet confidence that had propelled him to the top of his field by the age of 34. He was flying first class to San Francisco on Meridian Airways Flight 782. In less than 6 hours, he was scheduled to deliver the keynote address at the prestigious Ethelred Design Conference, the culmination of a year's worth of tireless work on a revolutionary urban renewal project. This presentation wasn't just a job. It was a legacy piece. He approached the podium at Gate K-12, where a woman with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read Brenda was scanning boarding passes. Her smile was a thin, tight line, a mere suggestion of politeness that never reached her cold, pale blue eyes. "Good morning," Desmond said, holding out his phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. Brenda Gallagher didn't return the greeting. Her eyes flickered from his phone up to his face and then performed a slow, deliberate appraisal of his suit. A faint, almost imperceptible siwa tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Phone," she said, her voice flat, gesturing for him to place it on the scanner. He did. The scanner beeped its cheerful green approval. But instead of waving him through, Brenda held up a hand. "I'm going to need to see your carry-on, sir." Desmond indicated his sleek leather briefcase. "It's right here. It's well within the size limits. We're doing random secondary screenings for weight and balance." She recited the words, sounding hollow and rehearsed. "Please place it in the sizer." It was a minor inconvenience, but her tone set Desmond on edge. It was the kind of tone that implied he was a problem to be managed. Still, he complied without complaint, placing the briefcase into the metal frame it fit into with ease. He noticed she wasn't asking anyone else in the first-class line to do the same. Not the older man in the rumpled beige blazer, nor the young woman in designer athleisure wear. Just him. He retrieved his bag. "Everything in order." Brenda's eyes narrowed. She leaned forward, slightly lowering her voice into a conspiratorial, condescending whisper. "You know, for future reference, Meridian Airways appreciates it when our first-class passengers adhere to a certain professional standard of dress." Desmond blinked. He was sure he had misheard. "I'm sorry, that outfit," she continued, her voice laced with a sickly sweet venom. "It's a little loud, a bit theatrical. It doesn't exactly scream professional, more like nightclub promoter." The insult was so bizarre, so disconnected from reality, that Desmond was momentarily speechless. His suit was a masterpiece of tailoring worth more than her monthly salary. The prejudice was so naked, so brazen, it was almost surreal. He saw it now in her eyes. She didn't see a successful creative director. She saw a black man who, in her twisted view, didn't belong in the front of the plane. His success, his expensive suit, was an affront to her sense of order. He took a slow, calming breath. "My suit is perfectly appropriate for a business engagement," he said, his voice even and dangerously calm, "which is exactly where I'm heading." "I'm sure." Brenda sniffed, her disdain palpable. "But we have standards. We can't just have people looking like that, representing our premium cabin. It lowers the tone." She tapped a manicured nail on her counter. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside, sir. I need to verify a few things with your reservation." Desmond stood his ground. "There is nothing wrong with my reservation. You just scanned my boarding pass. I'm a Platinum Medallion member. I'd like to board the plane." A flicker of triumph flashed in Brenda's eyes. This was the confrontation she had been goading him into. "Sir, your tone is becoming aggressive. I'm not going to be intimidated. Step aside now, or I will have you removed from the gate area." He knew exactly what was happening. It was a classic playbook of escalation and blame shifting. She was creating a problem, and he would be cast as the cause. Around them, other passengers were starting to stare, their faces a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. A woman in a sharp, grey business suit, standing behind him, Jennifer Coates, cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said to Brenda. "This gentleman has been nothing but polite. You, on the other hand, have been incredibly unprofessional." Brenda shot her a withering glare. "This does not concern you, ma'am." Ignoring her, Desmond made a decision. He subtly unlocked his phone, which he was still holding, and activated the voice recorder. He held it casually at his side. "What is your full name, please?" Desmond asked Brenda, his voice a model of restraint. "I don't have to give you my name," she snapped. "I am the lead gate agent for this flight. Now for the last time, step aside." "I will step aside," Desmond said. "But I want it on record that you are denying me boarding a confirmed first-class passenger because you have a personal issue with my suit." Brenda laughed a short, ugly bark. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. I'm denying you boarding because you are becoming a disruptive passenger. It's my duty to ensure the safety and comfort of everyone. And frankly, your attitude is a threat." It was the final outrageous lie. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't made a single threatening gesture. He had simply existed in a way she found offensive. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. He watched as the last of the passengers, including the woman who had tried to defend him, were waved through with Brenda's plastic smile. The jet bridge door was closed. Desmond stood there, the dull roar of the terminal suddenly deafeningly quiet. He had missed his flight. He was going to miss his keynote, all because a gate agent with a chip on her shoulder decided to make an example of him. "Now," Brenda said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction as she turned back to him. "You can go to the customer service desk and see if they can rebook you. Maybe find something more appropriate to wear next time." Desmond didn't say a word. He just stopped the recording on his phone, the small click of the button sealing Brenda Gallagher's fate, though neither of them knew it yet. The walk to the Meridian Airways customer service center felt like a mile-long parade of shame. Desmond's mind was a maelstrom of fury, frustration, and cold, calculated anger. Every tick of the clock was another nail in the coffin of his keynote speech. He was supposed to be in the air, going over his final notes, visualizing his presentation. Instead, he was stranded, the victim of a petty tyrant in a corporate uniform. The customer service line was predictably a purgatory of disgruntled travelers. He took his place, his plum suit, now feeling less like a symbol of success and more like a target painted on his back. As he stood there, a figure approached him, breaking from the flow of the concourse. It was the woman from the gate, Jennifer Coates. "I'm so sorry," she said, her expression a mixture of anger and empathy. "I cannot believe what I just witnessed. That was one of the most disgusting displays of unprofessionalism I have ever seen." "Thank you," Desmond said, the simple acknowledgement feeling like a lifeline. "I appreciate you speaking up." "It was nothing. I'm a lawyer and I fly this route twice a month," she explained, handing him a business card. "Jennifer Coates. My firm is based in San Francisco. That woman Brenda was completely out of line. She created a conflict out of thin air. If you need a witness for anything, a formal complaint, a lawsuit, anything at all, you call me. I will write a sworn statement detailing exactly what I saw and heard." Desmond took the card, the solid weight of it a small piece of reassurance in the chaos. "Thank you, Jennifer. I might just do that." "You should," she said firmly. "Don't let them sweep this under the rug." With a final nod of solidarity, she was gone, disappearing toward her own gate. An hour later, Desmond was finally at the counter, explaining his situation to a weary-looking agent named Paul, who offered a series of unhelpful scripted apologies. The best he could do was a middle seat in economy on a red-eye flight that would get him into San Francisco at 5:00 a.m., long after the conference's opening night reception, and just a few hours before his now-missed keynote slot. Defeated Desmond accepted the ticket and found a seat at an overpriced airport bar. He ordered a bourbon neat and stared at his phone. He called Chloe, his second-in-command, and explained the disaster. She was horrified, immediately promising to contact the conference organizers and see if they could possibly reschedule. "They're going to be furious, Des," she said, her voice tight with stress. "The keynote is the anchor for the whole first day." "I know, Chloe. Just do what you can," he said, rubbing his temples. "I'm so sorry." After hanging up, he sat in silence, the injustice gnawing at him. He thought about filing a formal complaint through the airline's labyrinthine online portal, a process designed to exhaust and discourage. It would be reviewed by a faceless committee in a month, and he'd likely receive a form letter and a $100 travel voucher for his inconvenience. But then he looked at his phone again. He thought about the audio file saved in his voice memos. He thought about Jennifer Coates's offer. He was a creative director. He understood narratives. He understood how to reach an audience. And in the 21st century, the court of public opinion was often faster and more powerful than any corporate complaints department. He opened Twitter. His account @DesRodesigns had a respectable following of about 15,000, mostly people in the design and architecture world. He began to type his fingers, moving with a clarity and purpose that had been absent since the encounter at the gate. He didn't rant. He didn't curse. He laid out the facts with the precision of a surgeon. "Currently stranded at O'Hare," he began. "Was just denied boarding on my confirmed first-class flight 782 to SFO by a Meridian Airways lead gate agent named Brenda. Her reason, my custom-tailored suit was, in her words, not up to their professional standard. She called it theatrical and said people like me were lowering the tone. I have never been so publicly humiliated or profiled in my life. I was calm, I was polite, and I was still treated like a criminal. I missed my flight, and will now miss delivering a keynote speech I have worked on for a year. This is not customer service. This is blatant prejudice. Flying, while black, Meridian shame." He hesitated for a moment, then made another decision. He didn't want to post the full audio yet. That was his ace in the hole. Instead, he took a short 30-second video of himself right there in the bar. His face was calm, his voice steady. "This is Desmond Rowe," he said into the camera. "I was just denied boarding on Meridian Airways Flight 782. I want to show you the inappropriate and unprofessional suit that got me kicked off my flight." He panned the camera down, showing the deep plum wool, the sharp tailoring, the clean lines. He then panned back to his face. "To Brenda, at Gate K12, and to at Meridian Airways, judging your customers on the color of their skin instead of the content of their character or their loyalty as a platinum medallion flyer is a business model that is doomed to fail." He attached the video to the tweet and hit send. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. A few likes from his followers, a couple of sympathetic replies. Then a prominent design blogger with 200,000 followers retweeted it with the comment, "This is absolutely unacceptable. At Desmond Rowe is one of the most respected minds in our industry. At Meridian Airways, you have some explaining to do." That was the spark. From there, it was like watching a digital fire catch on dry tinder. The tweet was picked up by tech journalists, then social justice advocates, then celebrities. Within an hour, it had 10,000 retweets. #Meridian Shame started to trend in Chicago, then nationally. The comments section was a torrent of outrage. People shared their own horror stories about the airline. Pilots and flight attendants from rival airlines chimed in, condemning the gate agent's behavior. The short video was devastatingly effective. The contrast between his calm demeanor and expensive suit and the alleged reason for his removal was stark and infuriating. Desmond watched his phone buzzing incessantly, vibrating against the polished wood of the bar. The digital ripple he had started was fast becoming a tidal wave, and it was heading straight for Meridian Airways at 7:00 a.m. Pacific time, in a glass-walled office overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Robert Chen, the Vice President of Customer Experience for Meridian Airways, was sipping his first espresso of the day. His morning was a carefully curated routine of market analysis and competitor reports. That routine was shattered when his phone rang with the frantic tone of the company's head of public relations, a woman named Alicia Finch. "Have you seen Twitter?" she asked, dispensing with any pleasantries. "Alicia, good morning to you too. I haven't—" Robert said, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. A call from Alicia at this hour never meant good news. "Go look at the hashtag Meridian Shame hashtag. We have a 5-alarm fire." Robert typed the hashtag into his browser. The screen filled with a cascading wall of fury, all directed at his company. He saw Desmond Rowe's face, his calm, dignified expression, a stark contrast to the venomous accusations. He read the tweet. He watched the video. He saw the retweet count climbing into the tens of thousands. News outlets were starting to write articles. Acclaimed designer accuses Meridian Airways of racial profiling. Gate agents' dress code enforcement sparks viral outrage. "Oh God," Robert whispered. "It gets worse," Alicia said. The Ethelred Design Conference has just issued a public statement in support of him condemning our discriminatory practices and demanding an immediate response. They've tagged every major news outlet in it. This isn't just a disgruntled passenger anymore, Robert. This is a full-blown poor catastrophe. Robert's mind raced. This was the stuff of corporate nightmares. The allegations were toxic racial profiling, abuse of power, elitism. The victim was articulate, credible, and well-respected in his field. The airline's brand, built on decades of marketing itself as a premium inclusive carrier, was being dismantled in real time by 280-character attacks. "Get me the gate report from ORD Flight 782 this morning," he commanded, already logging into his internal systems. "I want the agent's name, her service record, and the official reason listed for denying boarding to passenger Desmond Rowe. Assemble the crisis team. I want everyone in the main conference room in 20 minutes. The preliminary report that landed in his inbox minutes later was chilling. The gate agent was Brenda Gallagher, a 22-year veteran with a mixed but not egregious service record. A few customer complaints over the years, mostly for rudeness, but nothing that had ever escalated to this level. The official report for denying boarding to Desmond Rowe was logged under code 14B, passenger non-compliance and belligerence. Belligerence, Robert muttered to himself, rewatching Desmond's calm, measured video. The two images simply didn't connect. The crisis meeting was tense. The team, composed of executives from PR, legal, and operations, watched the video on a large screen. The mood was grim. "The initial response has to be fast and contrite," Alicia argued. "We issue a statement saying we're aware of the incident, that we have suspended the employee pending a full investigation, and that we have reached out to Mr. Rowe to apologize and rectify the situation." "Hold on," said Marcus Thorne, the head of the legal department. "We can't just throw an employee under the bus without an investigation. The union will be all over us. Suspended pending investigation is fine, but we need to be careful with the language. We admit no wrongdoing until we have all the facts." "Marcus, the court of public opinion doesn't wait for due process," Alicia shot back. "We are getting killed out there. Our stock is going to take a hit when the market opens. We need to stop the bleeding now." They compromised. A carefully worded, anemic statement was drafted and posted to Meridian's official Twitter account. At Meridian, Airways is deeply concerned by the experience described by Mr. Desmond Rowe. We do not tolerate discrimination of any kind. We are conducting an immediate and thorough investigation into this matter and have reached out to Mr. Rowe directly. It was like throwing a bucket of water on a volcano. The public saw it for what it was: sterile, evasive corporate speak. The replies were swift and merciless. "What is there to investigate? Fire the racist. Don't be deeply concerned. Be better. Have you reached out with a new flight that gets him to his keynote on time, or just a boilerplate email?" Worse still, Desmond Rowe himself replied to their tweet. "For the record, at Meridian Airways has not reached out to me directly. I have received no calls, no emails. I am still sitting in O'Hare. Your statement is a lie." The public frenzy intensified. Now, the airline wasn't just prejudiced. They were liars. Robert Chen felt like the captain of a ship taking on water from all sides. He ordered his team to get Desmond on the phone immediately, not an assistant, but him personally. While they scrambled to find a number, Robert placed a call to the station manager at O'Hare. "I need you to find gate agent Brenda Gallagher. Get her off the floor and into your office. I want to speak with her. Now!" He knew this conversation would be the turning point. He hoped for a tearful, remorseful employee who had made a terrible mistake. An employee he could send to sensitivity training, an employee whose contrition he could use as part of their public narrative of learning and growing. He was about to be sorely disappointed. Brenda Gallagher was not remorseful, and she had her own story to tell. Brenda Gallagher sat across from the O'Hare station manager's desk, a phone on speaker between them. On the other end, Robert Chen's voice was tight with carefully controlled urgency. Brenda, however, was the picture of defiant indignation. She wasn't scared. She was angry. In her mind, she was the victim, a dedicated employee being hung out to dry because of a troublemaker with a smartphone. Brenda, this is Robert Chen in corporate. I need you to walk me through the incident with Mr. Rowe this morning. Robert began, trying to keep his tone neutral. It was straightforward, Mr. Chen, Brenda said, her voice sharp and self-assured. The passenger was immediately hostile. He approached the podium with a very aggressive demeanor. When I selected him for a random secondary baggage screening, he became belligerent. He refused to comply with crew member instructions. Robert frowned, cross-referencing her statement with the official report she had filed. It matched perfectly. The report says he was belligerent. Can you be more specific? Did he shout? Did he use profanity? He was posturing, getting in my face. Brenda insisted, her story growing more elaborate with each sentence. His tone was menacing. He accused me of targeting him. He caused a significant disturbance, which is why I had to deny him boarding. I was concerned for the safety of the crew and the other passengers. He seemed unstable. There was a moment of silence on the line. Robert looked at Desmond Rowe's face on his computer screen. Unstable. Menacing. It seemed impossible. Brenda, Mr. Rowe has posted a video online. He appears perfectly calm. He claims the issue was his suit. He alleges you told him he was lowering the tone of the first-class cabin. A derisive scoff crackled through the speaker. Of course he's saying that. He's twisting everything. I made a passing comment that we encourage professional attire, and he flew into a rage. He's turning this into a race thing, to get attention, to get a payout. It's what people like him do. I was just following procedure. The phrase hung in the air, thick and poisonous. People like him. Robert felt a cold chill. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't an employee having a bad day. This was something deep and ugly. Brenda wasn't just defending her actions. She was doubling down, building a fortress of lies around her prejudice. She was fabricating a narrative where she was the diligent protector of company policy and Desmond was a dangerous aggressor. So to be clear, Brenda, Robert said, his voice now turning to ice, your official position is that Mr. Rowe was a security concern due to his aggressive behavior, and any comments about his clothing were either misinterpreted or part of his tirade. Absolutely, she said with unnerving confidence. I have 22 years of service with this airline. I know a problem passenger when I see one. I stand by my decision 100%. After the call ended, Robert sat in stunned silence. The situation had just become exponentially more complicated. He now had a he said, she said scenario, but one of the parties was his employee, backed by a powerful union. Firing her based solely on a passenger's tweet, no matter how viral, would be a gift-wrapped wrongful termination lawsuit. The union would argue she was being sacrificed to a social media mob without due process. The legal team confirmed his fears. Her service record is not perfect, but there's no history of this kind of overt racial bias, said Marcus Thorne. It's her word against his. If we fire her now, she'll claim we're discriminating against her, based on the public pressure. It'll be a mess. This was the twist Robert hadn't anticipated. The antagonist wasn't a simple mistake-maker. She was a committed fabulist. She was weaponizing corporate procedure and union protection to shield her bigotry. Meanwhile, Brenda wasn't idle. Knowing she was under investigation, she immediately contacted her union representative. An internal memo was quickly circulated among airline staff, summarizing Brenda's version of events. A heroic gate agent bravely stands up to an aggressive, non-compliant passenger and is now facing a trial by social media. Inevitably, the memo was leaked. A sympathetic airline blogger with a contrarian streak, published an article titled "Is Meridian Throwing an Employee to the Wolves?" the other side of the story. The article painted Brenda as a working-class woman, just trying to do her job, and Desmond as an entitled elite who couldn't handle being told no. It mentioned his garish purple suit and his arrogant attitude. This new narrative, however flimsy, was enough to muddy the waters. It created a small but vocal minority online who defended Brenda, decrying cancel culture and praising her for enforcing standards.
The
corporate fortress, which had been on the verge of surrendering, was now being pressured to defend its walls. Meridian Airways was caught in a pincer movement. On one side was the overwhelming public outrage demanding justice for Desmond Rowe. On the other was a brewing internal conflict, a potential lawsuit, and a counter-narrative that, while false, provided just enough plausible deniability to make an immediate decisive action feel risky. Robert Chen felt trapped. He had tried the path of corporate apology, and it had backfired. Now Brenda's lies were forcing the company into a defensive crouch. He knew deep in his gut that Desmond Rowe was telling the truth. But Brenda had left them no clean way out. The airline was forced to issue a second, even weaker statement. "We are continuing our investigation to ensure a fair outcome for all involved. We ask for patience as we gather all the facts." Patience was the one thing the public no longer had. To them, gathering the facts sounded a lot like hoping this all blows over. They saw it as the ultimate betrayal. Meridian Airways was protecting its racist employee. The siege on the corporate fortress intensified, but now the attackers had a new target, not just Brenda Gallagher, but the entire rotten system that seemed poised to protect her. Desmond Rowe sat in the sterile lounge of the O'Hare Hilton, his rebooked red-eye flight still hours away. He had finally received a call not from Robert Chen, but from a low-level executive assistant who offered a scripted hollow apology and a travel voucher. It was an insult. He had politely declined. Then he saw the second wave of the story break. He read the blog post defending Brenda, filled with insidious quotes from the leaked internal memo. He saw the vile comments accusing him of being an aggressive thug and a race baiter. They were trying to flip the script to paint him as the villain of his own story. The calculated cold fury he had felt at the gate returned tenfold. They thought it was his word against hers. They were about to find out how wrong they were. His first call was to the business card he'd been given, a tangible piece of evidence in a digital war. Jennifer Coates answered on the second ring. "Mr. Rowe, I've been following this online. It's monstrous what they're saying about you," she said, her voice sharp with legal indignation. "They're calling me aggressive. They're saying I was a threat," Desmond said, his voice tight. "You were there. You saw everything." "I did," she confirmed. "And it's a complete fabrication. You were the epitome of grace under pressure. She was the aggressor from the moment you stepped up to the podium. I'll write my statement right now and have it notarized. It will detail every single word I heard, every condescending look she gave you. I'll email it to you within the hour." True to her word, a multi-page PDF arrived in his inbox. It was a lawyer's dream, precise, detailed, and utterly damning. It corroborated Desmond's story perfectly, from the random baggage check to Brenda's snide remarks about his suit and her escalating hostility. Jennifer Coates had become his star witness. But Desmond knew that in the court of public opinion, audio-visual evidence was king. While he was on the phone with Jennifer, a direct message popped up on his Twitter. It was from a user named Kev Travels, a man named Kevin. Mr. Rowe, the message read, I was at gate K12 this morning. I didn't see the beginning of what happened, but I saw the end. I saw her refusing to let you board. You were being completely calm, and she was being incredibly smug. I was so mad I filmed the last minute or so on my phone. It's not much, but it shows you weren't being aggressive at all. I don't know if it helps, but I have it if you want it. Desmond's heart hammered in his chest. Yes, he typed back immediately. Please, anything you have would be a great help. A few minutes later, a video file downloaded to his phone. Kevin was right, it wasn't the whole encounter, but it showed the final critical moments. It showed Desmond standing perfectly still, his hands at his sides, asking calmly, "Can you please just give me your name and your employee ID?" And it showed Brenda a smirk on her face, turning her back on him, and saying to another agent, "Make sure the flight is closed out. No more changes." The video ended with a clear shot of the jet bridge door closing. There was no shouting, no posturing, no menacing behavior. The video was short, but it was a torpedo aimed directly at the hull of Brenda's story. Desmond now had two powerful pieces of evidence, but he was holding the ultimate weapon himself, the full unedited audio recording he had made. The recording that had captured everything. Her first condescending words, the insult about him looking like a nightclub promoter, her lie about him being aggressive, his own calm, measured responses. It was the entire narrative from start to finish in crystal clear audio. He forwarded Jennifer Coates's notarized statement and Kevin's video to a high-profile investigative journalist at a major news network who had reached out to him for comment. He included a short, simple note. This is the evidence that proves Meridian's internal story is a lie. Then he sat down with Chloe and his own company's legal counsel via video conference. Together, they decided on the final move. They would not leak the audio to the press. That would be too theatrical. They would send it directly to Meridian Airways' legal department and its board of directors. It would be delivered with a simple, two-sentence letter. This is the unedited audio of the incident at Gate K12, involving Desmond Rowe and your employee, Brenda Gallagher. We trust you will now take the appropriate action. It was a checkmate. It wasn't a threat of a lawsuit, not yet. It was something far more powerful. It was the undeniable truth delivered privately, giving Meridian Airways one final chance to fix their mess before he was forced to detonate it publicly. At Meridian's headquarters, the arrival of the email sent a shockwave through the executive floor. Robert Chen, Marcus Thorne, and the CEO gathered in a soundproof conference room and played the audio file. They heard Brenda's cloying, condescending voice. "Doesn't exactly scream professional, more like nightclub promoter," they heard her say. "We can't just have people looking like that, representing our premium cabin." They heard Desmond's incredibly patient voice. "I want it on record that you are denying me boarding because you have a personal issue with my suit." And they heard Brenda's fatal lie. "I'm denying you boarding because you are becoming a disruptive passenger. Your attitude is a threat." The audio was the smoking gun. It proved that Desmond was telling the truth, that Jennifer Coates was telling the truth, and that Brenda Gallagher had not only been prejudiced and unprofessional, but that she had then lied to her superiors, filed a false report, and allowed the entire corporation to walk into a PR minefield on her behalf. The lie had unraveled. The fortress they had been defending was built on sand, and the tide was coming in. The discovery of the audio recording triggered a complete and total panic within Meridian Airways. The he said, she said defense was obliterated. The company wasn't just facing a PR crisis anymore. They were facing potential federal lawsuits for discrimination, shareholder revolts for mishandling the incident, and the permanent loss of customer trust. Brenda Gallagher's lie had made her a catastrophic liability. Robert Chen, who had been on the fence, was now incandescent with rage. She hadn't just been racist. She had played him and the entire executive team for fools. The emergency board meeting was short and brutal. There was no more debate. The new strategy was one of complete and utter capitulation. The first move was swift and decisive. Brenda Gallagher was called into the O'Hare station manager's office for the last time. Her union representative was present, but it was a mere formality. They played the audio for her. According to a later account from someone in the room, the color drained from Brenda's face. Her defiant smirk dissolved into a mask of pure shock. She had been caught red-handed in an undeniable lie. She was summarily fired for gross misconduct, filing a false report, and discriminatory behavior. Her 22 years of service evaporated in an instant. The union, faced with incontrovertible evidence, could do nothing to save her. The next step had to be public. A simple tweet would no longer suffice. Alicia Finch scheduled a press conference for that afternoon. Robert Chen, as the face of customer experience, was chosen to be the sacrificial lamb. He had to stand before the world and not just apologize, but grovel. Dressed in a somber navy suit, Robert stood at a podium bearing the Meridian Airways logo, facing a sea of cameras. His expression was grim. He looked like a man heading to his own execution. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice heavy. "I am here today to offer a profound and unreserved apology to Miss Desmond Rowe." He didn't make excuses. He didn't use weasel words. He laid the company bare. "An incident occurred yesterday at our Chicago O'Hare hub that was not just a failure of our customer service policies, but a failure of our basic human decency. Our employee, in her interaction with Mr. Rowe, exhibited behavior that was discriminatory, unprofessional, and deeply offensive. Her actions were based on prejudice, not policy. Her words were her own, but they have stained our entire organization." He continued, his voice gaining a pained strength. "To make matters worse, our initial response was inadequate. Our investigation was flawed. We allowed a false narrative to persist for far too long, one that wrongly and disgustingly painted Mr. Rowe as an aggressor. This was a lie. Mr. Rowe behaved with a dignity and patience that I and this company do not deserve. We have seen and heard incontrovertible evidence that proves Mr. Rowe's account was accurate from the very beginning, and that our employee lied to us and to the public." It was a stunning admission. He publicly confirmed that Brenda had lied. He took responsibility for the company's fumbling. "The employee in question has been terminated from her position with Meridian Airways, effective immediately," he announced. "But we know that is not enough. This incident has exposed a deep sickness within our corporate culture, and we are committed to curing it. Starting next month, we are partnering with leading diversity and inclusion consultants to implement a mandatory top-to-bottom bias and de-escalation training program for every single employee, from our baggage handlers to our CEO. This is not a one-time fix. It will be an ongoing part of our corporate identity." Finally, he addressed Desmond directly, looking straight into the main camera. "Mr. Rowe, we are profoundly sorry. We failed you. We not only ruined your travel plans and caused you to miss a career-defining moment, but we subjected you to a humiliating experience and then allowed your character to be smeared. An apology is not enough. We have arranged for a private charter to take you to San Francisco at your convenience. We are also making a $500,000 donation in your name to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We hope you will accept this as a small, inadequate token of our deep remorse. The press conference was a corporate bloodletting. By falling on their swords so completely, Meridian hoped to staunch the bleeding. For the most part, it worked. The public, while still cynical, saw the move as a genuine, if forced, attempt at atonement. The story shifted from racist airline to a case study in how to handle a PR disaster. Desmond watched the press conference from his hotel room. He accepted the apology not with gratitude, but with a solemn sense of resolution. He issued a short statement through his lawyer. I accept the apology from Meridian Airways. My goal was never to get an employee fired, but to shed light on the subtle and overt acts of prejudice that people of color face every day. This was never just about a suit. It was about respect. I am hopeful that the changes Meridian has promised are not just for show, but will lead to real systemic change. The conversation should not end here. The corporate reckoning was complete. Meridian Airways was bruised, humbled, and facing a long road to rebuilding its reputation. Desmond Rowe was vindicated. But for Brenda Gallagher, the true consequences, the hard karma of a life altered by a single act of hate, were just beginning. 18 months is a peculiar stretch of time. It is long enough for a storm to pass and for the landscape to be irrevocably altered, yet short enough that the memory of the thunder still lingers. For the two individuals at the heart of the Meridian Airways firestorm, 18 months had been a lifetime. Their paths, which had crossed for one venomous moment at Gate K-12, had since diverged so radically that they might as well have been living in different universes. One trajectory was a blazing ascent into unforeseen influence and purpose. The other, a grim, grinding descent into a prison of bitterness and obscurity. This was not the work of fate or magic. It was simply the long, patient, and brutal mathematics of karma. Desmond Rowe's new path began in the same city where his old one was nearly derailed. The organizers of the Ethelred Design Conference, mortified by the incident, had eagerly offered him the closing keynote address. He accepted. On the final day of the conference, he walked onto the main stage to a wave of supportive, expectant applause. The audience of industry titans, academics, and rising stars knew his name now for reasons that went far beyond his portfolio. They expected a gracious, perhaps even defiant speech about his original topic of urban renewal. He loaded his presentation, the title slide illuminating the screen behind him. Symbiotic Urbanism, the Future of Cityscapes. He looked out at the thousands of faces, took a sip of water, and then clicked the remote. The slide vanished, replaced by a simple, stark white screen. A murmur went through the auditorium. Good afternoon. He began, his voice calm and resonant. I'm not going to be giving that presentation today. Instead, I want to talk about the design of a much smaller space, a space that is roughly 3 feet wide, defined by a podium and a scanner. I want to talk about the architecture of a gate. For the next 45 minutes, he held the audience utterly captive. He dissected the encounter at O'Hare not as a personal grievance, but as a critical design flaw in human systems. He spoke of how prejudice is a kind of hostile architecture of the mind, creating barriers where there should be gateways. He argued that every interaction, from a corporate policy to a customer service script to the very layout of a public space, is a form of design, and that it can either be designed for inclusion and dignity or for exclusion and humiliation. My suit, he said, Gesturing to the immaculate charcoal grey suit he wore was seen as a flaw in the system of first class. But the suit wasn't the flaw. The flaw was in the system's programming and the biases of its gatekeeper. And so I ask all of you, the most brilliant design minds in the world, what are the flaws in the systems you are building? Who are you designing for? And more importantly, who are you designing against? When he finished, there was a beat of profound silence, and then the room erupted. The applause was not just polite. It was a roar, a catharsis. It was a 5-minute standing ovation that felt like a verdict. That speech transformed his career. The video went viral even more so than his original tweet. His firm, Rowe Designs, was suddenly fielding calls from Fortune 500 companies, not just for architectural work, but for consulting on inclusive design and corporate culture. His partner, Chloe, sat in his office a month later, scrolling through a list of potential clients on a tablet. "Des," she said, her voice filled with awe, "these aren't just clients. These are the clients we dreamed of landing 10 years from now. They don't just want our buildings, they want our philosophy." The influx of capital and influence gave Desmond an idea. He established the Plum Suit Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing scholarships and mentorships to minority students in design, architecture, and the creative arts. He wanted to ensure that the next generation of talent would never have to feel like they didn't belong in the rooms where decisions were made. The foundation's launch was his true victory, turning a symbol of his public humiliation into a beacon of hope for others. Brenda Gallagher's trajectory had no such upward momentum. For her, the 18 months were a slow, agonizing slide down a gravel slope. Her first delusion was that she could fight back. Armed with a belligerent bottom-tier lawyer recommended by her increasingly distant union rep, she filed a wrongful termination suit against Meridian Airways. The preliminary hearing was a disaster. Her lawyer argued she was a scapegoat, sacrificed to the woke mob. Meridian's legal team, led by a stone-faced Marcus Thorne, simply asked for permission to play Exhibit A, the full unedited audio recording. The judge agreed. As Brenda's own condescending voice filled the hushed courtroom, more like nightclub promoter. Her lawyer's face went pale. The judge listened for less than a minute before calling the attorneys to the bench. The case was dismissed with prejudice, the legal equivalent of a door being slammed, locked, and bolted. Her lawyer later billed her for the humiliation. Defeated in court, she sought vindication elsewhere. She found a temporary home in the shadowy corners of the internet, becoming a minor cause célèbre for a fringe podcast that specialized in grievances against cancel culture. Sitting in a cramped, poorly lit studio, she told her story to a sycophantic host. "He was the one with the attitude," she insisted, her voice raspy with resentment. "He came at me all puffed up in that ridiculous purple suit. I was protecting my passengers. That's all I did. This was a setup from the start. They sent him in to make trouble to get a payout. And the airline, they're cowards. They just rolled over for the mob." The interview failed to launch her comeback. Instead, it sealed her fate, providing fresh and damning evidence of her complete lack of remorse. Her personal life disintegrated in tandem with her professional one. Her husband, Paul, had tried to be supportive, but her bitterness was a corrosive acid that ate away at everything. The final argument happened on a Tuesday night in the kitchen of the house they could no longer afford. She was ranting about a news segment she'd seen about Desmond Rowe's foundation. "Look at him, St. Desmond, parading around with his charity all built on a lie," she spat. Paul, who had been silently staring into his coffee cup, finally looked up. His face was etched with a deep, weary sadness. "Brenda, stop," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Just for 1 second. Stop." "Stop what?" "Stop telling the truth." "It's been over a year," he said, his voice cracking. "I lost friends over this. My family is embarrassed to talk to me. We're about to lose this house, and all you can do is talk about him. Don't you see he's moved on? He won. You are the only one still stuck at that gate. It wasn't the mob that ruined our lives, Brenda. It was you, your pride, your hate, and you still can't see it." She stared at him, her face contorted with rage, ready to unleash another tirade. But she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Nothing. The love, the support, the shared history. It was all gone, burned away by the constant toxic heat of her resentment. He moved out the following week. The final bleak chapter was written by a freelance journalist. Following a cold trail of public records, he found her in a bleak strip mall in northern Indiana. She was working as a cashier at a value giant discount store. The journalist observed her for a few minutes before approaching. She moved with a stiff, joyless economy, her hands scanning bulk packages of paper towels and off-brand sodas. Her Meridian Airways uniform had been replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting red vest. He got in her line and bought a pack of gum. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you Brenda Gallagher?" Her eyes, once cold and confident, darted around with paranoid speed. "Who's asking?" She snapped, her voice low and gravelly. "I'm a journalist. I just wanted to ask you a few—" "Get out!" she hissed, her face turning a blotchy red. "I have nothing to say to you people. You twist everything. You're all part of it." "Part of what?" the journalist pressed. She leaned forward, her voice a venomous whisper that carried the full weight of her self-imposed misery. "The whole thing, the whole rotten system. You think it was about a suit. It was never about the suit. It was about putting a good, hard-working woman in her place. That's what they do. They tear people like me down to build people like him up. Now get out of my line before I call security." He left. There was no repentance here, no lesson learned. The hard karma that had befallen Brenda Gallagher wasn't merely the loss of her career, her home, or her husband. It was the complete calcification of her soul. She was trapped forever in the amber of her own lie. A prisoner in a life she had single-handedly destroyed, forever convinced she was the victim. And in a quiet university library, hundreds of miles away, a young Latina woman, the inaugural recipient of the Plum Suit Foundation Scholarship, adjusted the plans for her first architectural design, a blueprint for a brighter, more inclusive world, completely unaware of the bitter, hateful ghost whose actions had made her dream possible. So what's the real takeaway from the story of Desmond Rowe and Brenda Gallagher? It's a stark reminder that in our hyper-connected world, there are no small actions. A single moment of prejudice, a single lie to cover it up, can trigger an avalanche of consequences that can redefine a life. For Desmond, that avalanche carved a path to a higher platform, one he now uses to create positive change. For Brenda, it buried her in a tomb of her own making. This story shows that karma isn't a mystical force. It's the logical and often brutal result of our own choices echoing back at us. The world is watching now more than ever. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help it reach more people. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell for more real-life stories of drama, justice, and consequence. Thank you for listening.